Hey folks, welcome to week 11 of DMD 220, Introduction to Apps, also known as Web Design 1. How is everybody? I hope you're all doing well. Okay, so what are we doing this week? Well, we are really sort of carrying over what we started last week in week 10, which was the beginning of Project 2, an excellent e-commerce site. But there's a couple of added things this week that you'll be able to get working on while you are finishing up the stuff from week 10 or after you finish up the stuff from week 10. So let's take a look over on the syllabus. Okay, so here we are in week 11. We normally would have met April 6th, 8th, and 10th. And like I said, last week on week 10, we introduced our brand new project, Project 2, an excellent e-commerce site. And you guys were to go visit the FIT Toy Design Program's website, their 25 years of toy design website, and pick out one of the student toys that you found interesting from their anniversary flip book here. And then once you decided on the toy that you really liked, you were going to start working on the initial brainstorming steps. Now, these initial brainstorming steps, as we see over here in Canvas, if we go to assignments, and go to Project 2, Initial Brainstorming Steps, you will see they are not due until April 10th at 8 a.m. So that is not until this Friday. So that will still be eating up the majority of your time this week, is working on those initial brainstorming steps. So before we get on to the new stuff for week 11, let's review what those initial brainstorming steps were as you are currently working on them. So over here with the Project 2 handout, you'll see here the initial brainstorming steps were to write a one-page explanation of what you think the toy that you chose from this link is all about, give it a name, and come up with a basic narrative about what it's all about. What were its play features, who is its intended audience. Then you were going to imagine what other toys, accessories, or items would complement your main toy choice. Work to expand its world, and things that could be offered possibly alongside it. And we talked a little bit about how that works in real life, how companies like Hasbro actually do similar things. And then you would be writing a second page about that. And then, of course, you can include sketches, and of course, you are encouraged to use your imagination and be specific in your writing. So essentially, on Friday, you're turning in a 2-page document that answers all these questions as creatively and to the best of your ability. And of course, you can include some of your own sketches. That would be great too. So we're still working on that for the majority of the week, but now we're going to sort of move a little bit into the next section here, which is planning an e-commerce website, which is really just sort of fleshing out a little bit of the background on this. And since you guys are working in teams, you can start working on this as you wrap up doing your initial brainstorming steps. Now, there is nothing actually due for this next section. It's just to start thinking about it. So we have the initial brainstorming steps, and then as you can see, homework after this week, we'll be getting into our actual website workflow where we hop right into step 5 and then 6. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. But the sort of background material you should be doing this week, the in-class section, we'll call it, is to visit a number of e-commerce sites, perhaps some that you shop at, and begin compiling a list of visual and interactive elements that you think are most effective. These can include introductory narratives and world building, play scenarios, image galleries, toy specifications, product descriptions, customer reviews and ratings, and more. Now, of course, this example is specific to a toy website because you're working on an e-commerce site for a toy, but I think it is important to check out e-commerce sites from a variety of locations, even ones that have absolutely nothing to do with toys. So in the background this week, as you're working on finishing up your initial brainstorming steps, go visit some e-commerce sites. Check out some that you maybe are not familiar with, as well as ones you are. Now, of course, we all visit places like Amazon or Etsy, or sort of larger corporate type e-commerce websites like Nordstrom or whatnot. But smaller e-commerce websites, or even ones from outside of America, like European sites, can be interesting and show you some resources and design elements that maybe we're not used to seeing, or maybe will just spark some imagination. So here's a few examples here. This one is a Canadian company called Roulard, which I'm sure I'm pronouncing incorrectly. They have a really great website. They do furniture and office space materials. And you can see as you go through the site here, they have some really nice photography. There are links embedded over the images, which will take you to different areas. They have some consistent elements, like the typographic logo stays on the left side of the page, as well as the uppermost navigation stays at the top, and when you hover over it, some of them have pull downs, which will give you overlays, which gray out the background. They do a really nice job of keeping this short and consistent. It's a scrolling site, but as you can see, it's not really long, which is good. People don't like to scroll endlessly. A lot of fixed elements. Again, the uppermost navigation, the search bar, the links to their social media sites are on the right. The typographic logo, which brings you back to the home page, is on the left. So this sort of peninsula-like margin all the way around the left side, top and right side, is a fixed set of elements. And then the scrolling happens in between those. And like I said, it doesn't scroll for very long. So something to think about. Another one here is this one called Unspun. It's a clothing store. They have some really interesting type choices. I'm not sure I love their type choices, but I like how interesting they are, at least. And I think it's really brave of them to sort of bifurcate the page and have a giant piece of photography on one side and then a big expanse of color on the left with some minimalistic graphics, some iconography and typography, as well as their logo here. And you'll notice that everything is a link. Everything takes you somewhere, which is pretty great. Another one here, this one, Neuro, is a sort of a wellness company. They deal with a variety of sort of health benefit related items. Simple website. I really like how it's very photography driven. The typography is clear and to the point. And again, a scrolling website, but broken down into some really clear areas. The above the fold is very nicely defined. And then we get into the next section. Again, nicely defined. Third section, again, really well defined. So they do a good job of really sort of delineating the different sections and what they're talking about. But you'll notice that from a written point of view, there's not a lot written. This is just a very short paragraph of information. So they're really heavy on negative space, well-designed graphics, and good use of photography. In fact, each of these sections don't really include a ton of type. So I think the sort of overall design of this is really nice. Another one here, this is called Web Socks. Pretty much exactly what it sounds like, a sock company. Again, not an American company, so certainly check out some European e-commerce sites too. They'll give you some ideas that maybe we don't see as commonly in more domestic sites. An ice cream company, which looks kind of delicious. Again, nice photography, clear typography, really inventive scrolling going on here. One side scrolls up while the other side scrolls down. This is called parallax scrolling, by the way. You can look that up. Now, even though we're building prototypes in XD and we can't actually replicate these sort of scrolling effects, we can certainly indicate them in our site notes when we're building the prototype. But this is a real interesting way to get the type on one side to match up with the image on the other side through this parallax scrolling. And then it just sort of comes to an end here in a more simple fashion. And then lastly, I like this one a lot. This is Rex Vintage because they have a cursor tip, which you don't see very often. That's kind of like a web, like a late Web 1.0, early Web 2.0 thing, is to put like a little character on your cursor. It's a neat bit of programming, which I think is fun for this particular site. You'll see how there's like a little cartoon alien creature on the end of the cursor here. But what I also like is the way they're presenting their clothes as sort of paper cutouts. They have the photography of the clothes, and they just photograph them on like sort of, you know, cardboard backgrounds, and then they just cut them out roughly to make it look like it's paper cutout. So really interesting visual choices here. On top of a really plain white background with some super simple typography. So the graphics really sort of make it. So anywho, going through some other e-commerce websites out there, ones you're familiar with and ones you're not familiar with would be great, just to sort of help expand your mind and come up with some ideas for yours. Okay, so again, you are finishing up the initial brainstorming steps. Make sure you get those submitted to Canvas, 2-page paper with sketches, by 8 a.m. on the 10th. Check out some other e-commerce sites just to start getting some ideas. There is some sort of textbook reading this week in this video, the top e-commerce design trends of 2019. You can find that video on YouTube from that link directly. So make sure to watch that. And other than that, that is it for the week. If you have any questions, if you get stuck, if you need some help, be sure to email me. Next, we will be diving into sketches and wireframes, but we'll talk about that soon.